We begin with a Fox News alert. Protests yesterday outside the Supreme Court following two monumental rulings. In a 6-3 vote, the High Court ruled in favor of a Colorado graphic designer, Lorie Smith, who refused to design a custom wedding website for same-sex couples, successfully arguing it conflicts with her Christian faith. The majority putting her First Amendment rights above the state's non-discrimination law.
Today is certainly a day of victory, but not just for me, for all Americans. The court has affirmed that the government cannot force anyone to say something it doesn't believe.
And in a separate ruling, President Biden suffering a major defeat as the justices struck down his $430 billion student loan bailout plan. It would have allowed eligible borrowers to cancel up to $20,000 in debt.
Did you overstep your authority?
I think the court misinterpreted the Constitution.
And this, of course, follows a previous day of landmark decisions with the High Court voting to outlaw race-based affirmative action in college admissions. So a really huge week for the Supreme Court, for the country, and I hate to make everything political, but for Donald Trump as well.
Oh, the Supreme Court making America great again.
Yeah, for sure.
The Supreme Court offering us real hope for America.
Yes.
If you believe in principles, if you believe in policies that do not focus on race, if you believe in free speech, and if you believe that the executive cannot hand out freebies to the public in exchange for votes, then this week was a very good day for the United States of America.
Yeah, you know, I was on The Five last night with Gutfeld, and he said something I'd really never considered or put into perspective before. And he said this is not a conservative or a liberal court, it's the most libertarian court. And when you start looking back at decisions, things that conservatives are excited about, like overturning Roe versus Wade, or even these cases just this past week, a lot of it is kind of hinged on taking power and putting it back to the individual, giving you faculty over yourself, over the things that that matter to you. And I think there's a lot there. I think that this Supreme Court, obviously 6-3 split, conservative and liberal, but when they fall onto what I would believe to be a more libertarian personal liberty side of it, not just conservative, because there's a lot of conservative policies that still believe in big government in some ways, and that, you know, that's just kind of the truth of it. And that's not really where they fall. They fall, generally speaking, away from big government authority.
You know, one of the interesting things that came out of this decision was that Neil Gorsuch used the words of Nancy Pelosi back at the liberal justices and at this case against student debt. So listen to this.
People think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
You know, Joey, I would disagree with Gutfeld's characterization of the Supreme Court.
I didn't want to say that, but I did.
And it's not the way that a court should think of itself. It shouldn't think of itself in political terms.
Yeah.
It should not think of itself as Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative or libertarian. It should think of itself as to whether or not it interprets the Constitution in a strict or originalist manner, or sees it as a living document through which they can impart their own vision of the United States of America. And the reason I bring that up, and the only reason I point to clarification, is when we look at all of these cases, most people confuse what the court is saying on any one of these given issues. For example, let's start for a moment with the issue of the Colorado website designer.
Yeah.
The court did not really make a judgment on her religious exemption to laws. The court did not say you are allowed to not serve a same-sex couple. This was really blatantly about free speech. It was about the First Amendment, and you are allowed to hold certain points of view, and you cannot be forced to express others. And then in the student loan program, they just simply said this is executive overreach. It's not your power.
Yeah.
You do not have the power in the executive to forgive student loans. And the truth is, they all knew it. As you just read, Nancy Pelosi knew it, and Joe Biden knew it. Everyone knew this was a false promise.
Yeah. And interesting that you use that false promise, that false hope. Jackie Heinrich, our own Jackie Heinrich, pressed Biden on that question and asked this.
Mr. President, why did you give millions of borrowers false hope? You've doubted your own authority here in the past.
I didn't give any false hope. The question was whether or not I would do even more than was requested. What I did, I thought was appropriate and was able to be done and would get done. I didn't give Boris false hope, but the Republicans snatched it. What I did, I thought was appropriate and was able to be done and would get done. I didn't give Boris false hope, but the Republicans snatched away the hope that they were given, and it's real hope.
Even there, like referencing Republicans,
Right.
this was a rejection by the Supreme Court of the United States.
Right.
But they are going to be able to frame it that way. It was a Republican, I believe it was state attorney generals that brought the case before the court and said, or I can't remember now, it might have even been a nonprofit, I think, that ended up bringing it before the court. But basically it was Republican efforts to say, hey, this is overreach. It's spending, I think it's $430 billion. It's spending too much money, and it's not doing it the way it's supposed to be done, which is through an act of Congress. The irony here in the Nancy Pelosi saw it was basically she was rallying to get a bill passed. That's why she framed it that way. Congress didn't do that because the American people aren't believing in it, and that's why the executive had to do it. What really bothers me about this is that he knew this in 2020. He knew it in 2021. He knew it in 2022. This has been pure partisan politics. This was never about, if they really wanted to relieve folks of debt, they would have narrowed the scope of where they were providing relief to the point that perhaps the partisan politics of it didn't play in as much. There wasn't as big of a push against it, and maybe they kind of got by with it. But when you're using the HEROES Act, something that was specifically designed to help those that go to war for us, and you're using that as this blanketed approach to give everyone who qualifies, and I think it was $125,000 or less a year, of course people are going to challenge that. They knew people were going to challenge that, and I believe they thought they could stump on it to get reelected, stump on it to get elected, and then use it as a victimhood. Oh, the bad Republicans to get reelected.
Yeah, well, they're already working on workarounds for that, workarounds for affirmative action. So this is not over yet, although it should be over because the Supreme Court has spoken. We're going to move now to another Fox News alert. Protests.
Memory of the victims of the Holocaust must be unequivocally condemned, and those responsible held accountable. French President Emmanuel Macron is urging parents to keep teenagers at home as violence spreads. He claims social media is playing a considerable role in the riots. France is literally on fire, and this is a story that needs some focus, because what you're looking at here in France is something, although has occurred on numerous occasions in France, you've seen metastasize into other parts of Europe, and you've seen come here to the United States of America in 2020. This is, I mean, we're talking about libraries, we're talking about memorials, we're talking about extreme danger here in France.
Yeah, this is one of those things where the thing that they're upset about, they may be absolutely right. They may have unlawfully or unjustly not excuse or open the door for, or even really shouldn't even be a protagonist for the kind of thing we're seeing. People burning innocent people's livelihoods, burning down libraries, doing things like this to show to express their frustration. No, this is something different. This has nothing to do with what happened in that incident, in my opinion.
Well, we did see this before. I mean, this is sort of their George Floyd moment. And when George Floyd riots occurred on that summer, one of the interesting things that happened, offshoots of it, was that we saw BLM flags being and protests happening in Europe. So this movement, this BLM movement, has taken off, and I think in this case, it'll be interesting to see if that moment of George Floyd and the way it had that global interest and participation on some levels, if that's helping to organize this. You saw Macron talk about how social media had something to do with it. Of course, in our case, it also, social media helped fuel some of those riots as well. Well,
as you allude to, Joey, there are deeper stories at play here in France. This is a story about unfettered immigration, open borders. This is a story about assimilation, cultural divides, and, of course, a story about race as well. And, look, France is not the United States of America, and I'm not an expert on the cultural collisions within France, but this story is much deeper than simply this one moment, as you point out, with the officers and this young man in France. Meanwhile, back here at home, look at the cover of the New York Post. Baskin robbers is the headline. Shoplifting is so bad, stores locking up tops of ice cream. So reportedly Fairway Supermarket, which is in my old neighborhood of the Upper West Side, is guarding $6 cartons of Haagen-Dazs with bolted plastic tops, which can only be removed with a device at the register, as other shops padlocked freezers for the treats.
You know, it makes sense
Fairway
because
last night.
you can't get that back, right? If they take off with the ice cream, it's just going to melt and you can't get it back. It's not like they're taking off with a watch that you can get back. I would
Look at
guard the
that.
ice
So you
cream,
can
too.
grab the carton, but it's got this thing on top.
I mean, this is really, it says something about this moment in time, because normally if you're going to steal, you don't steal ice cream, because for exactly the reason you said, it's not going to last long.
You're not going to take it and sell it for something.
No, it's going to be really, but this is the point that we've gotten to, and it's a sign of the times.
Well,
Have you seen that viral?
Look, Sarkis
Where people pull the lid off and lick ice cream. Have you seen
Oh
that?
yeah, I've seen that.
That was the who was the pop star that licked donuts years ago? It's like that kind of, that's more of a counterculture, I guess. Like, hey, I'm going to be outrageous for the point of being outrageous. What we're seeing now
Was that Ariana Grande?
You would know before me. I think, isn't that a Starbucks order? I'm not sure. Anyway, what my point here is, we've gone from teenagers being silly and stupid to people believing there is zero, and not just believing, but knowing, because it is fact. There's zero accountability for what we would call petty theft. I saw a video on social media of someone coming in with a blowtorch, with a butylene torch. I might have made up a fossil fuel there. Anyway, butane torch and like torching the locks that are on the racks that kind of stop you from pulling it off the rack. And so they have time to come in, light a torch, and fire it up and wait for something to melt, and then pull it off and walk out, because nobody can stop them. Nobody will stop them. Police aren't around. The DAs aren't going to charge them. They're going to get away with it. You know, California's, what is it, $1,000 limit, that if you steal under $1,000, they're not coming after you.
I don't have time to shop in that store.
And look at the
I just don't
money.
have time.
I've done it. Obviously, it does take time.
You got to go online.
You got to
That's what it is.
Flag down an employee somewhere in the store and
Hope
go,
they have the
"Excuse me."
key.
I've said this before. Excuse me, I need some Old Spice, and then take some. I get these. Oh my gosh, she's got a bunch of keys and.
Now we know what you use.
And how much money are they
but I'm
spending on it?
considering moving to Degree.
Oh, really? Okay. This is a little TMI, but I like it.
Yeah.
You weighing in on this, Joey?
Everyone smells
Are you
fresh
an Old
to me.
Spice guy? My dad's an Old Spice
I'm
guy.
whatever ends up in the drawer. Whatever the shopping fairy brings in, I'll take it. All right. We're going to turn now to your headlines. A State Department report on the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, get this, finds the Biden administration failed to plan for worst-case scenarios. But the president is still defending his decision to pull American troops out as the Taliban advanced on Kabul.
All the evidence is coming back there. Remember what I said about Afghanistan? I said Al-Qaeda would not be there. I said it wouldn't be there. I said we'd get help from the Taliban. What's happening now? What's going on? Read your press. I was right.
Yeah, I'll have more to say about that later. All right, 13 U.S. service members were killed, by the way, in a suicide bombing during the evacuation, but I guess he thinks it's all okay. The State Department report, which was quietly released yesterday on a Friday before a holiday, includes a range of recommendations, included calls for enhanced crisis planning. The Director of National Intelligence is issuing a warning to U.S. companies operating in China after the Chinese government issued a new counter-espionage law. The DNI saying the updated law creates a potential to create legal risk or uncertainty for foreign companies, journalists, academics, and researchers. They also say any documents, data, materials, or items can be considered relevant to Chinese national security due to ambiguities in the law. Quarterback Alex Magoo and the Birmingham Stallions are taking on the Pittsburgh Maulers tonight for the USFL Championship. Magoo already putting up some hardware on his mantle.
Is time the number one reason that you became the USFL's MVP this season?
This individual trophy it means a lot, but it doesn't mean what. I didn't come here for this. I came here to hold that.
I'm enjoying this. All right, USFL Executive Vice President of Football Operations, Daryl Johnson, is joining us later this morning as we preview the championship game. And those are your headlines.
All right.
Are you watching some USFL?
A little bit.
Yeah, I've seen a game or two.
Yeah.
I haven't had time, but if I had time, I would be watching it. I'm all about football
today.
all year.
Yeah.
We can do it tonight. Well, still ahead, thanks, but no thanks. New reports revealing that President Biden repeatedly warned top aides not to offer advice about Hunter. Fox News contributor David Webb joins us next with his expertise. Hunter Biden's legal team accusing lawmakers of being obsessed with, quote, attacking the Biden family. In a fiery statement, Hunter's attorney accusing House Republicans of manipulating the damning WhatsApp message. This, as new reports show, the president warned top aides against offering any advice on Hunter's public appearances. Here with reaction, Fox News contributor and host of the David Webb Show on Sirius XM Patriot.
Good
David
morning,
Webb.
Rachel.
So great to have you. So first, let's talk about the WhatsApp message. They're trying to say his lawyers, Hunter's lawyers, are saying, oh, these have been manipulated. They're coming out saying this, trying to discredit the whistleblowers and this information.
Well, let's face it, this is normal for the reaction of Biden and his lawyers. They don't attack the content. They go after, is it in a blue bubble or not, that it's been altered, that news organizations are reporting this. This is all about deflection for them.
Yes.
What's in those messages, even as alleged. And let's say, for instance, that his father's not in the room when he sends the threatening messages he claims. The fact is he's still using his name. They haven't gone after it. They haven't gone and said it's false, just that it didn't look the same when they put it out.
Yeah.
And to the Republicans, just make it look accurate and you'll eliminate that.
Yeah, they're just trying to muddy the waters and create some doubt somehow in somebody's mind. But here is the message, and I think it's worth putting up again. I'm sitting here with my father, and we would like to understand why the commitment has not been fulfilled. And then, of course, as you know, David, it goes on and a few weeks later, $5 million pops up in each of their accounts. So obviously, really hard to say that this did not happen when $5 million shows up not long after.
We're supposed to believe, Rachel, that all this smoke has no fire underneath it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not one message. It's a compendium of information from the laptop. It's the fact that they knew 1 year before it was weaponized during the campaign that the information on the laptop was true, that it wasn't a Russia disinformation campaign.
You know, another interesting development in this, David, is that Joe Biden must be getting a lot of advice from the people around him to say, listen, you know, this is not a great time to hang out with Hunter and travel with him. And I've been saying, and so is Sean, we actually have a whole episode about the fact that on our podcast that we believe that Joe Biden is actually really afraid of Hunter Biden, that he knows that politically this doesn't look great, not just the messages, but hanging out with Hunter right now. It would probably be good to have some distance, but he can't because Hunter is volatile, is very angry, as we know from the emails that have come out from the laptop about having to be the money bag for the family and sort of being the dirty guy while everyone else gets, you know, Bo was the hero and Joe was the, you know, president, and he has to take care of the family financially. Your thoughts on that?
Well, let's go back to Joe Biden for a moment. You talk about Hunter's outbursts and volatility from what we know. Joe Biden's had the same problem since he's been in the Senate. People who I've worked with Joe Biden in the past that I've known have talked about his volatility, his shouting, that he gets angry, and Hunter no different. But they had a working relationship the way things are now being revealed to the public, where Hunter was the bag man, Joe was the influencer being sold. They were playing this together. And I don't buy this father-son, let's come together, show it, we go to Camp David, come to the state dinner. What it is an attempt to put a front out there that suddenly a father who used his drug addict son as a bag man for foreign deals where he had no expertise at all. Remember, he put him on a plane with him for 15 hours to go to China. Biden brags about his various relationships. Hunter goes behind him and collects the money. This is all part of an act being put up to make it seem as if father and son are now working together, our father and son team.
Yeah, this is not a father-son love story. This is a corruption scandal, and we ought to keep that clear. David, thanks for coming on. You always clear things up.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, thank you. Still ahead, a Fox weather alert. We're looking live at Rhode Island, where smoke has taken over. We're tracking the heat and the air quality concerns that you need to know ahead of Independence Day celebrations. Plus, Plan B, the White House is scrambling for an alternative after the High Court strikes down Joe Biden's student loan plan. Why our next guest calls this a missed opportunity.
Millions of Americans in this country who feel disappointed and discouraged. I didn't give bars false hope, but the Republicans snatched away the hope that they were given. A new path consistent with today's ruling to provide student debt relief to as many borrowers as possible, as quickly as possible. We will ground this new approach in a different law than my original plan, the so-called Higher Education Act. That will allow Secretary Cardona, who's with me today, to compromise, waive, or release loans under certain circumstances.
President Biden unveiling new student loan alternatives just hours after the Supreme Court struck down his far-reaching forgiveness plan that would have cost taxpayers more than $400 billion. New steps include a so-called on-ramp for repayments, as well as loan forgiveness for certain borrowers after 10 years, and a cap on monthly payments. Here to react, University of San Diego finance professor Dan Ricciardo. You know, Dan, there's a lot of conversation to be had, and we will be having it throughout the morning, about the constitutionality or the unconstitutionality of the program he had already laid out and what he plans to do now. But here's what I'd love to address with you. These student loan forgiveness programs, they actually don't do anything to solve an ongoing problem, which is hyperinflation in higher education. They don't do anything to solve the problem of the high cost of an education.
Hi, Will. Good morning to you. You're absolutely right. And also, I would add to that, Will, the accountability in higher education. You know, American consumers are terrific. We're probably the best on the planet. We know more about what goes into our mini-wheats than we do oftentimes what goes into, you know, spending and financing our higher education expense, right? So when you think about that, that's kind of a shame. And there's an opportunity here that you and I have talked about a lot over the last year or so on the air, which is we could have focused our efforts on reform instead of forgiveness. And that's really, I think, where we missed a huge opportunity with this.
Yeah, because forgiveness is easier and it's more sexy to sell to the voters. Hey, you just get out of your burden, out of your obligation. And that's a part of the conversation as well, accountability and paying for what you've taken on. But there is, the one legitimate side of this entire enterprise is, there is a massive problem. College costs way too much money, and it's going up way too fast. And the bang for its buck and the return on investment is not there. So what can we do to reform the problem of high cost of higher education?
I think you summarized it well, and I think it again comes down to accountability in the sense that we need to hold colleges accountable for outcomes, and families, shoppers, students, parents, families need to hold those colleges accountable as well, which doesn't mean that you need to go to the best named college, but spend more time thinking about and researching the outcomes for that college, especially, Will, when it comes to your major. Studies have shown it doesn't so much matter which college you go to as it matters what you major in, what you're good at when you come out, to see how employable you are and what kind of career you're going to have. I'm blessed. Right. I work for a college that's very focused on those issues, but I can tell you that's not the case across the board in higher education.
Let me get your input on this. You know, we're sitting at this moment in time in the economy where the Biden administration, I think even the Fed, they're worried that the economy is too hot. And in essence, in a way, it's going too well. Well, there is this sense of, I don't know, forbearing. There's a sense of dread, I think, for many Americans out there. The economy feels fragile, like we're out there in the middle of the pond on thin ice. Here's what Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says, though, about our future.
For a year now, we've heard our fair share of predictions about an imminent U.S. recession. But our economy has proven more resilient than many had thought, and I continue to believe there is a path to reducing inflation while maintaining a healthy labor market. Without downplaying the significant risks ahead.
So what do you think, Dan? Is she too optimistic in her recession assessment, or are we too pessimistic?
I think the secretary is obviously a remarkably bright woman. In this case, however, I think that she misses the mark in the sense that while we're buried in the numbers, are we in a recession or not? What's consumer spending look like, et cetera? I call this a kitchen table recession, Will. What I mean by that is when you and I and our families sit around the kitchen table and we understand the fact that our paychecks aren't going as far as they were over the last year or two because of inflation and because our wages haven't kept up with that inflation, guess what? We feel that our family is in a recession. So this kitchen table recession that I like to refer to is real for many families. A lot of families are doing really well. Don't misunderstand me. But there unfortunately are millions of families across the country who feel that they're in a recession. And guess what, my friend?
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Yeah, that's absolutely what matters. All right, Dan Ricardo, great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
All right, coming up, stunning video shows Border Patrol cutting down wire meant to keep illegal immigrants out. Why they said they had to do it. But first, just plain wrong. United Airlines CEO.
We don't get a big break even by Monday, but we do cool things down a little bit across parts of at least West Texas. So you're going to get a bit of a break, which is going to be really well received. But already 83 in Memphis. That's the actual air temperature. And it is about 6:30 in the morning there. So big problems. Because of this heat, this kind of heat dome that's here, we're seeing all the storms fire around that area, not in the area, but around it. And we're going to see that again. We have it this morning, and we'll see it throughout the day today and tomorrow again. In fact, severe weather today threat again for us here, especially right across that confluence of the Ohio and the Mississippi River. That's going to be the bullseye for firing lines. Certainly the threat for a tornado or two. Definitely some really strong winds and some hail also. Tomorrow, that threat moves a little bit farther off towards the east, parts of the mid-Atlantic. Obviously, this weekend, Joey, we would like to not see these storms, but we do have these storms, and the smoke that's lingering, it does improve by Sunday into Monday. Joey?
Thank you, brother.
You bet.
All right, hundreds of flights are already delayed today as travelers face major disruptions for the holiday weekend. Unless, of course, they're the CEO of a major airline. United President Scott Kirby experiencing a public relations nightmare at 30,000 feet after chartering a private jet amid the chaos. Later forced to issue an apology for the decision, which he called insensitive to our customers who were waiting to get home. So how can the rest of us who don't have private jets get ahead of this travel nightmare? Let's ask our very own Kurt, the cyber guy. Kurt, I don't know. Should he have to apologize for using a private jet? Tell me what you think about this.
Joey, good morning. No, you don't have to apologize if you're CEO Scott Kirby at United for driving 17 miles away from Newark to a private airport to take your own private jet if you're going to give everybody else who's stuck at your airport a private jet to get to where they need to go. He is, what he should have done, rightfully so, as you know, Joey, is he should have been there with his team creating solutions for the people that have worked hard to build their vacations out and now are screwed sitting at the airport, not because of weather necessarily, but maybe because of the operational issues at United and other airlines that are pointing the fingers all over the place except at themselves right now. Here's what we know, Joey. Right now, if you're headed to the airport this summer, this weekend, today, you're really on your own. You're on your own to come up with some solutions, and I'll tell you, there's some really good ones that are out there.
Yeah, let's
Number
hear it.
one is a new website, right? You want to dive into this one? This is a new website called the National Airspace System Status Page. It's a website, and at first I looked at it and I thought, what's going on here? What's the motivation of this? And at first I thought it was maybe the Transportation Secretary trying to point fingers with this, but actually it's good information. What it lets you do is you go on this website, and it'll tell you, for example, I just dialed it up right now. It's telling me that it's going to predict that there are ground stops happening in Chicago pretty darn quickly at both of the airports there. Newark, LaGuardia, JFK are going to experience some ground stops probable after 9 a.m. Eastern this morning. So some really good information. You can see if your airport's on there so you can get a better idea as to what's going on before you get at the airport. Now, you're there. Joey, your flight gets canceled. It's delayed. What do? There's a great website called flightsfrom.com, and you can go there and you can find out, all right, I'm going to put in the airport I'm at, and it's going to tell me every frickin' flight out of here. That way, when you're talking with the airline, you can say, no, I see there's a flight right here to Cleveland. Even though it's not natural to go that way, please get me there, and then get me to where I really want to go. big tip here, you've heard it a million times, don't check bags. You want flexibility when there's trouble.
واحد تور دوبلي وواحد تور سامبل، يعني نتحصلوا على 3 تور. دوك نوري لكم كيفاش نديروا تور دوبلي. اذا هنا بعد ما فتحت العجينه تاعي راح نوريكم كيفاش نديروا لها تور دوبلي. هذا هو التور سامبل. بالنسبه للتور دوبلي راح نديروها بهذه الطريقه، يعني راح نختصروا الخدمه تاعنا. انا هنايا راح ندير لها تور سامبل، يعني 3 كما قلت لكم من قبل. نكمل نفتح